In June 1977, 5 months after taking office as the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter wrote a letter to the then President of Nigeria, President Olusegun Obasanjo. And in the letter, he said, "You and I will be as one." He said the US was seeking stronger friendship with the continent of Africa, and Nigeria was going to play a special role in that friendship. And so Jimmy Carter said he had instructed people in his government to inform Nigeria of every activity the US will be undertaking in Africa, and Nigeria was welcome to advise the US on what actions to take. That letter is what President Olusegun Obasanjo was referencing when he said the US respected Nigeria more when he was president. That is true. But this was it from 77 to 79. Olusegun Obasanjo was president again from 99 to 2007. Why didn't he bring up those years when he was talking about the US respecting Nigeria when he was president? I'll break all this down for you on this channel. My name is Tenebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics from the perspective of an African. What I try to do is just offer my opinions and analysis based on facts and evidence. So that is what I'm going to do right now. Olusegun Obasanjo was first a military ruler from 1976 to 1979. Jimmy Carter was president of the US from 1977 to 1981. Their presidency crossed each other. So they were in office around the same time, right? And when Jimmy Carter took office, one of the things he wanted to do was move away from the East and West competition that dictated the relationship the US had with Africa. So Africa was always like a testing ground for the US when it came to its relationship or its beef with the USSR during the Cold War. So Africa was very insignificant to the US before Jimmy Carter took office. And Jimmy Carter was like, yo, Africa is a whole place with a group of people who have their own lives that have nothing to do with the US and Russia. So we are going to treat Africa on the basis of who they are, right? Judge them based on the content of their character, to quote MLK. And so that was the case or the mentality Jimmy Carter came to office with. He wanted to pursue human rights issues around the world, and also wanted to give Africans real independence. That is what he said. You know, Africans struggle for independence as at 1977 when Jimmy Carter took office, was almost at the dusk of our independence struggle. Most countries in Africa at this point had gained independence, but we were struggling to move to the next phase after independence. So Jimmy Carter was like, you know what? I'm going to do something to help you. And so Cyrus Vance, who was the Secretary of State, was a big advocate of, having a relationship with Africa. And so 6 days after he took office as the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter laid down his Africa agenda and laid down the fact that Nigeria was a special country to him. Nigeria could be the leader of Africa, and so the US should pursue friendship with Nigeria. He said that. And the June letter came. He wrote a letter to the president of Nigeria. And what he was doing in that letter was inviting Olusegun Obasanjo to come to the US for a state visit, which happened. Olusegun Obasanjo visited the US. He went to Washington, D.C. in October 1977. And of course, we wouldn't know the meetings or the conversation they had behind the scenes. But whatever conversation was had behind the scene, Jimmy Carter liked it so much that Jimmy Carter became the first US president to visit Sub-Saharan Africa when he went to Lagos in March 1978. So Jimmy Carter wasn't just about words. He really wanted to pursue a friendship with Africa. So he went to Lagos in 1978, stayed in Lagos for like 4 days. Usually state visitor pretty fast, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. He was in Lagos for 4 days, which means that he really, really respected Olusegun Obasanjo. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's a photo of when Obasanjo went to Washington, the drape, the agbada, three-piece agbada, standing next to Jimmy Carter. You could see that one person had swag, and one person was just, president of the US. Anyway, and so the friendship between the US and Nigeria was strong, and Nigeria was seen as a leader in Africa by the US until 1981. What happened in 1981? So let me preface by saying this. In the US, foreign policy is dictated by the government in power. So the US president doesn't have that much power domestically. The president of the US can't wake up and ask banks to close down, or the way African leaders have power in their countries. The US president doesn't have that much power in the US. But one area that the US president is as powerful is foreign policy. The executive of the government is usually spearheading the foreign policy agenda of the US government. So whenever there is a change in government in the US, in most cases, it affects foreign policy. In some cases, it doesn't, because there's continuity in military and, foreign policy workers. But if the president of the US wants there to be a change, there would be. So the president who came after Jimmy Carter was Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan felt like the US needed to pursue constructive engagement with South Africa. At this point, the apartheid regime was operating in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was in jail, and blacks were being oppressed in South Africa. And so the whole of Africa used to treat South Africa as persona non grata. The whole Africa had a negative attitude towards South Africa. And the US president at the time, Ronald Reagan, was like, F your Africans. South Africa is going to be my friend. And in case you didn't know, the US said Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. That is why I disrespect or disregard any time the president of the US says somebody in Africa is a terrorist. I don't like when the US president makes statements like that, because it has historically proven that when it comes to dealing with Africa specifically, the US presidents or governments have never really been in the habit of getting it right. And so Jimmy Carter actually did something crazy. Nigeria led a vote at the UN to pass a resolution to sanction South Africa's apartheid regime. And the US used its power as its veto power to veto the resolution by Nigeria. And so Nigeria's relationship with the US started deteriorating under Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Reagan thought that the white government in South Africa was a more worthy friend of his than Nigeria or any other country in Africa. Ronald Reagan also had the same attitude towards Ghana. So it is what it is. And so it's not that the US stopped respecting Nigeria because of something Nigeria did. It was just a government policy. Ronald Reagan came to office and was like, I want to have more friendship with South Africa and not Nigeria. That is what happened. And so this brings me to the question I asked. Why didn't Obasanjo bring up his civilian years? Because Obasanjo was president of Nigeria from 1999 to 2007. When Obasanjo came to office, Bill Clinton was the president of the United States. And Bill Clinton and Obasanjo had a cordial relationship. It wasn't that deep. as Jimmy Carter and Obasanjo did. And when Bush came to office, you know what happened? 9/11 happened. And Bush's focus as president was on counter-terrorism, the war on terror. So Bush relationship with every other country in the world was about how that country was going to support the US in their fight against terrorism in the world. And so while George Bush was in the habit of calling Nigeria a friend of America, and Obasanjo visited Nigeria under George Bush. I don't believe George Bush ever visited Nigeria. I believe he did once, right? Yeah, I think Bush visited Nigeria once. I know Bush visited Ghana twice. I don't want to waste your time and go through that because it's not that relevant. My point is, the reason why Obasanjo brought up his relationship with Jimmy Carter is that Jimmy Carter was a strong friend of Africa, had a strong love and respect for Nigeria, and so treated Nigeria as a worthy leader in Africa. Every president of the US since Jimmy Carter did not have that attitude towards Nigeria. And so I believe that the inference Obasanjo was trying to make was that Nigeria no longer have the respect of the US because of something or leadership problems in Nigeria. But the history tells us that that is not an issue. It's just an issue of what is important to the president of the US at any given time. The president of the US now, Donald Trump, has some issues that are important to him, and Nigeria do not necessarily align with the US on those issues, and so Donald Trump will not respect Nigeria because they don't align on issues. And Nigeria is a sovereign country. Nigeria has the right to not align with the US on every issue. You understand? I just wanted to point out and shine the light that, yeah, what Obasanjo said is partially right in regards to the US did respect Nigeria and treated Nigeria as a leader of Africa in the 70s. But that was in the 70s. From the 80s onwards, that was not the case. That stopped being the case. I wanted to give you more information, so if you're having a conversation with your friends at the beer parlor, you know what to say about Obasanjo's statement. Because I know if I was living in Ghana right now, me and my friends on Friday at the beer parlor are going to go hard on the statement by Obasanjo. Some will be on Obasanjo's side, some will be against Obasanjo. So if you're on Obasanjo's side on the issue at your beer parlor, you can cite the letter and the relationship between Obasanjo and Jimmy Carter. If you are against Obasanjo, which these days very few people are against Obasanjo, it's interesting. Obasanjo has become one of the most beloved former presidents of Nigeria. Interesting. So if you are one of the few people who is against Obasanjo, you can cite the fact that Bill Clinton and George Bush did not accord Obasanjo the respect Jimmy Carter accorded him. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel if geopolitics is something you are into. The channel is still small, and so, but I really love this stuff. I really love world news. I love geopolitics. I think that there is a vacuum in the conversation about geopolitics. As an African, I have some perspectives that CNN, Al Jazeera, and DWTV, BBC do not have. So what I do on my channel is bring that perspective, and if more and more people support and subscribe to my channel, comment, and do all that, it will help me to grow to the level I want to grow. Because what I want to do is build a team of African intellectuals who can speak to the world on issues from the perspective of Africans. We used to have leaders in Africa who were leaders on the world stage. Obasanjo, like I cited, President Nkrumah of Ghana, President Rawlings of Ghana, Kenyatta of Kenya, Nelson Mandela. We need to bring back that energy on the world stage. That's what I'm trying to do with this channel. I'll see you on the other side.